Welcome back to Series About Rugby League. Today on our podcast we're going to talk about the most underrated players in the Super League. This is probably the hardest podcast we've had to film so far. Obviously we've done the Super League 13, we've done the top 5 coaches of all time, but now we're going to try and name underrated players, which is, I suppose, a bit of a controversial statement because obviously wherever you go and watch the games, you get different opinions on people because you'll watch people more than you'll see other people. So obviously, if you're a Leeds fan, you're going to watch Leeds players more, so you'll have more of an all-rounded view of certain players than maybe the people that can only watch them once every 3 weeks that are on TV. But we're going to try our best anyway, based on what we've seen so far in the season and the players that we like that maybe don't get the recognition they deserve. We're going to do it first and foremost by going through every single team. We're going to talk about some of the players that maybe don't get enough credit at their team, obviously maybe overshadowed by certain personnel. So we'll just go alphabetically in the league. We won't go down the league table because it'll upset me how low we're going to. So we'll start alphabetically at the top with Castleford Tigers. So you may as well take us away.
Yeah, so Oliver Holmes, been at Cass for a number of years now. Excellent player in my eyes. Good progressor of the ball. Strong in defence and can grab a few tries now and then. I think he's a good leader on the field. I think
the interesting thing with Oliver Holmes is that obviously you've got Liam Watts, who he's the big name, who some people really like him. I'm not his biggest fan, but he has that big figure of a name and people talk about him all the time, and he's the reason that Cass are doing this, and he's the reason that Cass are pushing forward in the line, he's the reason that Cass makes so many yards. But then Oliver Holmes sort of goes by the wayside because of that, and let's not forget Oliver Holmes has been selected in the England setup as well, which is it's no mean feat. He's a good, really, really good rugby league player, and maybe overshadowed a little bit by Liam Watts, and maybe arguably not really deserving to be undershadowed in that sense.
Yeah, well, you might be able to tell me how old he is, but I think he's one of those players that looks a lot older than he actually
25,
is.
I think he is.
He's still got quite a lot of years left in him, man. Feels like he's been around for forever, doesn't it? I mean, like I say, he's definitely underrated for me. When we play Cass, he normally stands out, and he's one of them that he can always come up with a try or a big play, or he was one of them that's always a 7 out of 10. You know,
yeah.
He never fall below that, and he'll always give 100%, and he's Mr. Reliable. I think for Cass.
I've never seen him have a bad game, but I've never really seen him have a really exceptional game. But
yeah,
for me, he is a very good player. And
he's consistent, and that's what you want,
that's what we need.
Coach's dream.
At the moment, we need.
I think another underrated player at Cass, in my opinion. I know you don't agree with me, funny enough, but I think he's underrated. I think James Clore. I think Castleford have struggled in like the last few seasons to get a back five that have really stood out in the league. Basically since they lost Solomona. And obviously Shenton was at his best then. But I think James Clore has come in, and I think he's done a really good job for the Castleford team. I don't think people talk about him. You've got, obviously, he's in a position where there's a lot of standouts in the league. Josh Charnley's scoring tries for fun. Joe Burgess has come in and scoring tries for fun. So why talk about James Clore? Well, I think given the problems that Castleford have had, especially with Greg Eden, who I don't think really is Castleford standard. I think James Clore has come in and done a really good job. But we only have a certain amount of time for every team because we need to get to our actual top 5. So we'll move on to Catalan Dragons, and I'll start with this one because I think there's some great players in this Catalans team. But like I said, when you talk about underrated players, you tend to talk about players that you've watched a lot, you've seen progress. For me, obviously, that's Wigan players, and Catalan have a lot of Wigan players. They have Matty Smith and Tom Tompkins and Mickey McIlaurin, who are obviously all favourites at Wigan. One player that is playing at Catalans that wasn't a favourite at Wigan was Lewis Tierney. And Lewis Tierney, I think, has been one of the standouts, especially in the first 6 or 7 games. Catalans were almost really reliant on Tierney to make big plays at times, and I think he's come from Wigan where he couldn't really get a game, he couldn't really live up to the expectation that was thrust upon him. But he's gone to Catalans and he's sort of rejuvenated his career, and maybe this is where he kicks on from.
Well, yeah, like you say, I think you're kind of shipped out to Catalans, deemed not good enough, and perhaps people were surprised that at the time that he got such a a big move to another Super League team who are always challenging or mid-table or thereabouts, and scored a try in the Challenge Cup final last year. And
the interesting thing about Tierney is, when you go week to week, you'd maybe not associate him with being the greatest player in the world, but he's stepped in big games with big shoes to fill, and he's produced. He played on the wing for Wigan in the grand final in 2016, and scored a try and made a very important tackle. He then went to Catalans on loan and played in the £1 million game at Lee and was one of the best players on the pitch that day at full back. And then he went and moved to Catalans last year and they won the Challenge Cup, and he was one of the best players on the wing in the Challenge Cup final. So maybe you don't look at him as a big game player, but he's certainly made big game players, and I feel like his career's definitely on the upwards. There's lots of players at Catalans actually that just don't get the recognition they deserve, maybe because the squad's so good in depth. You talk about Brendan Williams, David Mead doesn't really get talked about anymore since he signed from Brisbane.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Really, really good player. Brendan Williams, obviously a great player. So the Dragons maybe maybe the underrated team of the league definitely, in terms of individual personnel.
Well, the one I put down there was Matt Whitley, because he might be rated. He's gone there with quite a big reputation, quite a lot expected of him. But so I think when you think of Super League standout players, he's not one that would spring to mind, is it? And it kind of reminds me a bit of Elliot Whitehead when he went to Catalans. I think he'll really excel his game there, and still quite young and plays in a position where he gets his fair share of tries, and for me he's a brilliant signing for Catalans. I think he'll really progress there.
Interestingly, for Catalans, a lot of the players, as you say, aren't massive household names in Super League, but they are players that everybody would probably take in the team, like individually, but they're overshadowed because they've got names like Tony Gigo, like Greg Bird, like Mickey McIlloran. Like to overshadow those kind of players is a tough ask, which means that these guys can go under the radar and sort of do the job, and they do it really well.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Huddersfield Giants. Testing start to the season, but seem to have come into a bit of form recently, and there's a couple of players on our list that maybe are credited to that, and I think the one for me is Lee Gaskell, who obviously at St Helens had a really bright start to his career, and then sort of fell by the wayside, ended up at Bradford, struggled at Bradford as well, but he's come into the Huddersfield team and he looks a new player, and all of a sudden he looks like the kind of player that he was at Saints. He looks like he's found that form, and he's been an essential part of Huddersfield's sort of revival back to winning ways, and sort of bringing them away from that relegation battle that Leeds and London seem to find themselves in.
Yeah, well, when Danny Brough left Huddersfield, I think people were thinking, who's going to step up there? Who's going to really command that team and take charge? And I think that, along with Matt Frawley, I think he's done that, and he's done it really well. And he's always had a great kicking game. He's always had a good step. Come throw cut-out balls for fun. I agree with you on that one. I think he's a great player and very underrated.
Yeah, it's been good to see Lee Gaskell obviously come from Bradford, struggling there. Obviously, as you say, come through Saints as well. I think he's an attacking role as well, and I think, as you both mentioned, he's revitalised Huddersfield this season, and I think he played very well against Saints, his former club, on Sunday, and I think they were lucky not to come away with the win there. I think going forward, Lee Gaskell's got a huge part to play for the Giants in. And
they need players like that to commit to Huddersfield. Obviously, they've lost some key personnel, like you mentioned, Danny Brough. So they need players like Gaskell, who maybe the name isn't a standout name, but they need him to step up and do well. And his partnership with Alex Mellor has been outstanding. The little short balls and the way that Alex Mellor has been able to cut on the inside, and maybe part and parcel to the fact that Lee Gaskell is able to attract those defenders to give him the space on the inside. We'll move on to FC, the black and white side of Hull. There's a few names at Hull that strike me as a bit interesting, because obviously Hull have won silverware a lot recently, so there's a lot of players you just assume are the trophy winning players, but yeah, you do forget that for example Josh Griffin, who it seems that to me is actually one of the best in the league, but he's not talked about in this. So you talk about Mark Percival, or you'll talk about Oliver Gilbert, or you'll talk about Brass and Goodwin, or even King at Warrington, but you won't talk about Josh Griffin, but Josh Griffin, maybe not whole out up to the standards we expected them to be at the start of the season, but definitely the last few weeks he's started to step up again, and I think he's probably one of the best centres in the league.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that, and I'd also point at Dean Hadley as well. He's another one who, I think he was loaned out to Wakefield, he really excelled there. Hull got him back, and he's another one that will, a bit like we said about Oliver Holmes, he's another that never probably fall below 7 out of 10, will always put in a good shift for his team, and he's actually off contract, so I think he's getting a bit of interest, so it'll be interesting to see who gets him. But like I said, there's a few at Hull, and it is interesting for a trophy winning team. You've got like Chris Green as well, who just is a solid front rower. Like, you look at some teams this year in Super League, and down the middle they look a bit weak, but I think Hull are one of those that in big games will always use the forward pack. There'll be players like Green that'll go under the radar, that'll really make those metres.
Whilst people are talking about Taylor and Ellis, Green will be out there doing his job and nobody will. I'll mention it, and it's a very good point. We'll move on to the other side of Hull. Hull have had an interesting year actually. You'd at the start of the season, obviously with the first game against Hull, and they got that last minute try. Jimmy Kynors came in, and you sort of expected a bit from Hull. It's not really gone their way. Like, they went to Warrington and they put a really good performance in, but just lost. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, and we thought that Hull were maybe the more consistent of the whole teams, despite being lower in the table. But it seems like they just sort of like drifted off into nothingness, and but they have got a few players that are still managing to just set themselves aside. I think Craig Hall's been absolutely outstanding this year. Like, I wouldn't have expected him going in at fullback. Nobody would have expected him to do the job he's done. You could even talk about Jimmy Kynors now. Whether Jimmy Kynors is underrated is questionable, but at Leeds he obviously wasn't rated enough to get into the Leeds team, but has been a standout player for Hull.
Obviously, as a Leeds fan, Ben, would you take Kynors back, or do you think...
I'll take anyone at the moment.
Do you think maybe... What are your thoughts on Kynors at Hull?
I would have personally kept him, and I'd have kept Mitch Garbutt as well. You could maybe put on this list. I think he started the season well, and he's ended up near top of Man of Steel rankings, so people have taken notice of him. But prior to the season, no one talking about Mitch Garbutt, and he's.
There's two players there that Leeds clearly didn't. Didn't rate, but didn't rate enough to give a new contract to.
Yeah.
They've gone and done the jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Right, we'll move on to Leeds, and I'll come to you, Ben, because obviously this is your beloved team. Not doing it anywhere near as well as people expected to, but there are a few younger players that are doing the jobs that you would hopefully expecting the senior players to do that they clearly aren't doing.
Yeah, well, I talked about Harry Newman there. He's done well. He's stepped in at centre and he's put in some good performances. Cameron Smith, he's one of very few bright spots about this season. He's one of the forwards who can hold his head high, and Mikołaj Oledzki is...
I really like Mikołaj Oledzki.
Yeah, he's no nonsense, straight down the middle. He's the one that's really led out of those forwards and made the meters. We've struggled to make meters all season, but he's one of them that has really broken through the middle and given Leeds an option. But in a disappointing season, we've had 2 or 3 bright sparks, and it's been the younger lads that have done it.
Do you think at Leeds you maybe need a leader on that pitch, maybe apart from Watkins doing all the work, maybe someone like Oledzki getting the captaincy and bringing that unity back to the Rhinos? Or potentially,
yeah. I think Leeds are lacking a leader, and I think they're lacking a leader. Personally, I think they're lacking a leader in the halves to organise. But I do agree with you. They're lacking a leader up front. Oledzki's tried to step up, giving him the captaincy maybe a bit too early for that for me. But I think you never know if he got it, he could be a piece of genius. But
I think the interesting thing about Leeds is that we'll talk about every single team individually, and it's sort of hard to structure this in a way that we're not just naming players. But at Leeds, at every other club in the Super League, you talk about underrated players because you've got a list of players that do the job and they do it really well, but they're known. And you've got another list of players that do the job really well, but nobody talks about them, and that's what we're trying to get to here. Yeah. At Leeds, for me, the list of named players that everybody knows aren't doing the jobs,
Yeah,
which means that everybody else in the squad is technically an underrated player because they are doing the jobs, despite the fact nobody expected them to do it.
Yeah.
So the likes of Jamie Jones-Buchanan, Matt Purcell, Adam Cuthbertson to an extent, Brad Singleton, you expected them to come in and do a job, and for me, they're not doing the job they're expected to do, which means the likes of Cameron Smith, Mikołaj Oledzki, Brad Dwyer to an extent, because who was talking about Brad Dwyer before the start of the season?
Yeah.
And now he's Leeds' best player according to the fans. You know what I mean? Like, who were talking about these players before the start of the season, but they're the ones that are getting Leeds through games because the big players aren't stepping up.
Yeah.
So maybe Leeds are the one team where you're looking at underrated players as the players that are actually performing for Leeds.
Yeah, very true.
Not
Just the younger lads as well. Yeah.
We'll go on to struggle in London. Obviously, they came up from the Championship. Weren't expected to do a lot, but there's been some. Obviously, I think we're at a team where every single player you could say is underrated because nobody expects them to do anything at the start of the season. So we'll talk about Eddie Batty, for example. Eddie Batty is sort of the cult hero for London. It's the name that everybody sort of knows in Super League. Some people will argue that he's not underrated because he is the player that everybody knows, but I would argue he's underrated because at the start of the season nobody was talking about him, nobody knew who he was. I didn't know who he was, and like maybe that's just my sort of ignorance of the Championship at times, but it wasn't even a name that was being spoke about in high regard in the Championship. It was just sort of a player for London that was playing well, and he's come in and he's been one of the standout forwards in the league. So obviously we have to give Eddie Batty a mention, but there's loads of players at London. Morgan Smith, Alex Walker, Rhys Williams are all playing really well.
Yeah, it's good to see that players from the Championship who played for London last year have adapted well to Super League, most notably Alex Walker and Rhys Williams, as you said, both Welsh internationals who have played for the country obviously and under Championship coach John Kay, who masterminded the victory against Leeds at weekend. I think they've both been exceptional this year, helped Danny Ward's side massively and just played a really important part, and I think that's what London need to do, is develop those players further, and it'll be good to see how they get on the rest of the season.
I think the sad thing for London is that it does look like a bit of a doom and gloom season for them, unless the unthinkable happens and Leeds sort of collapse all the way through the season. Which is sad for the London team because, as you said, there's a lot of Championship players that are underrated, and they deserve the moves to Super League, but they only get it through coincidence. And
I mean, it says a lot about London that it is unfortunate if this happens, but if they were to go down, they would probably lose quite a few of their players.
Which says a lot about these players and the way they performed this year. Going into the year, nobody expected it. Which, I mean, big props to them for producing the players and being well coached. We'll move on to Salford. And Salford have a lot of underrated players purely because when you talk about, so we've been guilty of it in the past. When we talk about Salford, we predict the games, or we talk about the way they performed, or the way they're sort of trying to rejuvenate the club. The first two names that obviously come to mind are Jackson Hastings and Robert Louis, and then everybody sort of forgets about everybody else in the team, which obviously leaves a lot of space. Salford have got a lot of stick from about the forward pack this year, because obviously they've got the backs to sort of score the tries, but have they got the forwards to sort of boost them forward? And I think in the games where Salford have gone and won games and have got themselves into good positions, it's because the forward pack have been dominant, and people don't talk about it nearly enough. So you've got the likes of Josh Jones, who's doing really well. Griffin's doing really well, and for myself, Greg Burke. I know we were speaking beforehand, and it was like, I didn't even realise that he was still at Salford, sort of thing. Like, but for me, I've been watching him this year. I think he's been really, really good. He obviously struggled at Wigan, similar to the Lewis Tierney situation actually, where he struggled at Wigan. He's come in, and when he first came in, he looked really good, and sort of struggled a little bit. Ended up at Widnes for a bit, struggled at Widnes. Ended up sort of getting his Super League move to Salford. Salford were in that stage of trying to rebuild after losing Kukash, and sort of trying to build a Super League squad that could compete in Super League with a couple of star players. But it seems that Burke, over the course of this season, has just sort of like grown and grown and grown. It's sort of become an essential figure in that pack, and it's good to see him moving forward and progressing. But definitely a name to sort of keep an eye out for.
Yeah.
Almost. I mean, he's only 25. He's got a lot of time under his belt. And if he keeps progressing the way he is, it would become an important part of that Salford team for many years, not just for the season that we're currently in.
I think it's good to look at Nell Levels as well. I think he's played a massive part these last couple of seasons for Salford. Played a massive part in the £1 million game.
Yeah. Interesting about now, because obviously
Yeah.
the full-back wing situation is another one of those.
But it was linked with a number of clubs last season, including Castleford. But I think he's developed as a player as well under Ian Watson. Ian Watson's done a brilliant job, and for me, Salford have flown under the radar this year. And I think we saw it against Warrington that they can put performances together. And I think, as you mentioned, it's their going forward pack that struggled this season, but I think it's got better, and I think Salford going into the future could be one to watch.
Next on our list is a team that is actually quite hard to pick out underrated players because they've been that outstanding on the pitch. So, St Helens obviously only lost one game, and that was away at Catalans to a 1-point loss, and have won everything else. So to pick underrated players in a team like that is quite a difficult job because obviously they're all doing the job well, or they wouldn't be where they are. But we have got to try and do it. Any thoughts, first of all, Ethan?
Yeah, I think Danny Richardson fallen out of favour really at Saints, but Theo Farge has come in and done a good job for Justin Holbrook's side, and I think Danny Richardson is not underrated, but I just think he's fallen out of favour with the club, and I think he's still doing a good job. He's played dual reg at Lee a couple of times, done a good job there in the Championship, and I think he needs to now focus on fighting his way back into the side.
See, I would disagree with you, and I would say he is underrated, and I think I keep referencing our videos that we've done in the past, and we spoke about St Helens and I think it was against Warrington. It was the Warrington game. We were previewing St Helens versus Warrington, and I made a comment about I don't think they'll be able to cope with Warrington with Danny Richardson in the halves because without Theo Farge, I don't think they'll be as strong. And then Danny Richardson came out and proved everybody wrong. He was one of the best players on the pitch.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, there were a lot of people writing him off, and they were thinking, oh, maybe he's just a bit overrated and he's not good. But maybe after all this, he's a bit underrated. Maybe could even argue he should be starting for Saints with the performance he put in against Warrington. Obviously, he's struggling to keep his players with Theo Farge playing so well, but he's definitely a name to throw out there. I think obviously Matty Lees and Dominic Peru, because obviously Zeb Tay is playing so well, he's the name that if you're going to talk about back rows, you're going to go straight for Zeb Tay. But I think Matty Lees and Dominic Peru are doing a great job for St Helens.
Yeah, particularly Matty Lees is a young lad who's come through, and he's highly rated at St Helens, but he won't get a mention because of Alex Walms and because of Luke Thompson. But he's forced his way into the team, and he's again. I think if Alex Walms and Luke Thompson do move on or go to the NRL, then they're certainly not going to be short because this guy's going to step up, and it won't surprise me if he becomes just as good, if not better, looking at him because he looks like an outstanding forward. And on Peru, I think when Saints signed him, Saints fans were perhaps a little bit disappointed. They were a bit of an unknown quantity, didn't really know much about him, but yeah, he's come in and he's a really strong physical player, and he's one of them that you line up against and you perhaps probably don't really fear, but when that game starts he challenges for everything and he's a real competitor, so yeah, you'd include him in that. He don't really get mentioned either.
Well, you touched on basically the essential part of this video, which is fans of certain clubs will rate certain players. So, for example, St Helens rate Matty Lees very, very highly, and rightly so. But it's from an outsider's point of view, obviously a Cass fan, Wigan fan, Leeds fan, to pick these players that maybe aren't getting noticed by other teams or only being noticed by, which is great for St Helens because if nobody's noticing Matty Lees, then fantastic, you've got Matty Lees for a number of years. But for the rest of us that aren't really noticing, maybe we do need to sit up and notice that this guy can change a game and win a game for St Helens. We'll move on to Wakefield. Wakefield have rejuvenated themselves. Another one of these teams that just seem to have spun the league table on its head, and it's what's made these Super League so exciting this season. Teams like Wakefield, especially seeming that big money signing Danny Brough and in my opinion, one of the best halves in the league, Jacob Miller, both out injured for an extended period, and they've still managed to go out and win games of Rugby League, which is amazing when you think about it. The two best players, two of the best three players in the squad have been injured, and they've still managed to come out and get big results in big games. And even if you're only winning games by 2 points, it's enough. And Wakefield are going doing that. And there's a lot of players that you could talk about. Matty Ashurst, for example, and I'll throw a bit of a story in there because we went to Wakefield earlier in the season, and I mentioned Matty Ashurst to a few Wigan fans, and I was laughed at. Oh, Matty Ashurst is crap, that sort of thing. Matty Ashurst is a really, really good Rugby League player, and it just goes to prove that outside of Wakefield, maybe Matty Ashurst isn't rated as highly as he should be. But I think he's been outstanding for Wakefield this year. I think he's extremely underrated, and I think there's a lot of teams in Super League that would happily pick him up.
And then you've got players like Craig Kopchak, who's coming from Salford, and again, like we spoke about earlier, probably rated by Salford fans, definitely now rated by Wakefield fans. Perhaps don't get mentioned overall when you're talking about standout forwards in the competition, but he is a standout forward for me, and he's part of the reason like David Fafita's getting mentioned at Wakefield all the time, poorly, but Craig Kopchak is another one that makes their forward pack so dominant.
Maybe it's the new Man of Steel sort of rule in the way that we do Man of Steel now, which I do believe is the right way to do Man of Steel, but it does lead people to obviously looking at that list and thinking, right, these are the standout players in the league, and maybe nobody else is a rated player because they're not on the list, which just leads to other players being overlooked. And I think Wakefield have got a plethora of talent that gets overlooked because David Fafita is playing so well at the top. We'll go on to similar to St Helens Warrington, who are playing so well it's hard to pick out individual players that are underrated because obviously they're all playing class, so you can't talk about them all. And my first thought on this, and I sent this to you both last night, was Declan Patton. I think he's coming this year next to Blake Austin, and he's been fantastic. He's give Blake Austin the freedom to become the name that's the big name in Super League, obviously up there in the top three of the Man of Steel charts. But without Declan Patton being able to control that middle game and give Blake Austin the space outside, you wouldn't see Warrington using him as well as they have. And I think nobody really talks about Patton because everybody's talking about Blake Austin. Yeah,
I agree. And when Kevin Brown got injured before the season, everyone like time to step up Declan Patton in such an important position, and it is such an important position because Warrington have gone out and spent big money, and it's absolutely vital that they get somebody who's right in the halves, and he's been perfect, and he's linked with Blake Austin superbly, and he's not let anybody down at all.
Because obviously where Dak Patton will struggle next season is obviously they're getting Widdopin, aren't they? Warrington are getting Widdopin. Do you think, you've mentioned that Dak Patton stepped up, do you think he needs to bolster his game even more and possibly be on the radar for other Super League clubs?
There's no doubt that he's going to have a problem next year, assuming they will keep both Blake Austin and Gareth Widdop. So I think maybe look for a move, but I don't think he has to. I think he's still got time. He's very young, and maybe having Gareth Widdop and Blake Austin as your coach isn't such a bad thing for a couple of years, even if it doesn't mean you can't play every game. It might progress his game in a different way.
And plus you never know what's going to happen. You don't know how Steve Price is going to view it. He could put Widdop at fullback.
Yeah.
Could keep Patton in the house if he impresses that much. Could be Ratchford who drops out. There could be an injury. Yeah. For me, I think Patton is at the right club and he'll progress and become a great player.
Just mentioned Stephen Ratchford there. I think Stephen Ratchford is perhaps the most underrated fullback in the competition, in my opinion. I think he's been at Warrington for a number of seasons, and I think season in, season out, he's really developed as a player. I think he's brought leadership to the club. I think obviously is an England international, was very important in our 2017 World Cup campaign. But yeah, I think Stephen Ratchford is a good attacking player. I think he links up well with Dak Patton and Blake Austin in the halves as well, and those three are a good unit going forward.
I'd just add to that, like he's a obviously a well-known name is Stephen Ratchford, and we're talking about underrated players here, but I think he is rated, but he's still underrated. That's how good he is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Arguably won Warrington the game on Sunday with his kicking game. Obviously, didn't miss a kick and they won by 2 points. And whereas Headache had missed 1, which is the 2 points that Wigan missed. And
it reminds me of that kid Stephen Ratchford at school who was just good at every sport.
Yeah,
you can just see him being good at everything. He just looks like a good all rounder to
no,
me.
I think Stephen Ratchford. And I think this is the thing, as you were saying, that this is about underrated players. And Stephen Ratchford for me is the third best fullback in the league, but he still doesn't get talked about nearly as much as he should. For being the third best, you'd think he'd be mentioned every single week.
Yeah.
But he's not being mentioned because Blake Austin's being mentioned or Darryl Clark's being mentioned. Like I, we did a different segment and I was talking about how good Darryl Clark was, but not really talking about Stephen Ratchford.
Yeah,
so,
very true.
Definitely somebody that's slightly under the radar. There's a few players that warrant. You could argue Jack Hughes for one. It doesn't get enough mention, but obviously he's started to be rated more and more the more he progresses. And Joe Philbin's another one that's sort of come in and covered positions very well and maybe doesn't get the credit he deserves.
Another one as well, I think, Pat Moran as well. He's been playing in the Championship a bit and I think he's stepped up these last couple of weeks for Warrington as well, and I think he's going to be one for the future to watch as well going forward.
Interesting.
Very interesting. We'll go on to my side, which I think the hardest thing you can find is trying to pick underrated players for your own team, because you're watching week in, week out, so you know that who you rate and who you don't rate. So I really struggled with this, so I'm going to pass it on to you two and sort of like pass on the blame.
Well, I think you said it actually. I said it before you, and then you were like, well, yes, he's definitely the one, and it's Joe Bullock. He's come in, young lad, absolute man mountain, isn't he? And I remember when he played against Leeds, was it the second game of the season? And I was looking like, who is that? And he powered over our forwards, like there was nothing there. Seasoned forwards, like...
Yeah. He's an absolute machine.
Yeah, he just ran over them. Like, how old is he? 18, 19?
No, he's in 20s, I think.
20s.
Is he? Well, even so, I look at him and I thought, yeah, he could probably play for England. I'd put him in England too.
That's what I mean. It's that sort of... that's how I would define underrated, because even as a fan of him, I've seen him all year, I'm not really sure about his age or what he's doing. I just know we signed a lad from Barrow and he's come in and he's been one of the standout forwards in the team, and he's one of those that every time he comes on now, fans get excited because he's like, okay, Flower might be going off but Joe's coming on, so it's okay, we're alright, sort of thing. Whereas in the past you might get your big forwards going off and your backups a bit
when you signed him, everyone was like, who's this? Who we signed from Barrow? And I think he's just been absolutely exceptional. I think he's been one of the best signed players from the Championship in recent years.
Could be the next Alex Worms.
Exactly.
Maybe. Yeah, there's some gems in Championship and he's one of them.
Yeah.
And he'll definitely won't be underrated in a few years, I don't think. Everyone will know about him.
Yeah, I think next season, in the Super League Fantasy anyway, the Super League Fantasy at home, Joe Bullock was 50k and still is 50k, so if you want to go and pick him up, there's your bargain for the season. I don't think he'll be 50k next season. I think he might have gone up a bit.
Yeah.
There's a couple of us at Wigan, but like I said, it's very hard for me personally, because obviously I see these. I know who I rate and who I don't rate. I know there's a lot of Wigan fans that don't really rate Sam Powell, but I think he's a good.
Yeah.
He's a competent player. Ollie Partington is one I think has been outstanding, stepping in for Sean Watkins when he was injured. And Jake Shorrock's doing the same for Jared Samet. Obviously didn't play against Warrington, lost his place, but in the few games leading up to the Warrington game, obviously we were on a 3-game win streak going into Warrington. Jake Shorrock was very good for the team, and his kicking game, especially the way that he gets the ball, the height he gets on the ball, the pressure he puts on people under. Maybe obviously lost a little bit when he went to Salford, and he's come back and he's stepped up. Right, that is every team, and as I said, it's a difficult task to do, but we have sat and discussed, and we put together, as we always do, our top 5. So there's some players that we haven't mentioned purposely to mention them now. There's a couple that we have mentioned, but we will go through our top 5. 5th on the list, Ethan, we'll come to you. 5th on the list, Jay Pitts, London.
Yep. Been exceptional for London, I think, this season. Been a real driving force for them. London are lucky to have him, I think.
He's another one that's come the long way around as well. Started at Leeds, been at a few different clubs, but he's found a real home there in London, and he deserves this other shot at Super League, because there are players that perhaps are at bigger clubs and don't quite make it, and it's like how you respond to that. How do you come back after such a big disappointment? He's probably thinking, well, I'll never get a chance again to play at the top level, but he's gone to London and he's really excelled, and he deserves his chance, and he's not disappointing, that's for sure.
There's very few household names at London, like we were saying when we went through London, so you could argue they're all underrated. I think Jay Pitts is another one of them that's just not really spoke about, because as you said, it was sort of like go at Leeds, and not really sort of forgotten member. You get a lot of forgotten members of Super League in years gone by. I think Jay Pitts was one of them, but he's come back, he's stepped up, and I think he earns his place in this top 5 as one of the most underrated players in the league, and I think he would really do a job in most teams in the competition. 4th place, we're going to go from sunny London to sunny Salford. Yeah, I don't know how that works, but yeah, we'll go to Salford, and at the start of the season everyone was expecting Logan Tompkins to be the sort of standout 9 for Salford and continue on the progression that he's made since he left Wigan. But Joey Lussick has come in and has been absolutely outstanding in giving Jackson Hastings and Robert Louis a platform.
He's another player who's come over, a bit of an unknown quantity. Obviously his brother's perhaps more known than he is, and yeah, he's stepped up. Logan Tompkins, as you said, you would feel would have been the standout player in that position, but he's come in and he's helped Salford win a lot of games, and he's got a lot of know-how, and he's a smart player, and that's what you need in that hooking position. He knows when to go, he knows when to pass, he knows where to put players, and yeah, he's been a brilliant acquisition.
He's got good leadership, and he reminds me a bit of Paul McShane at Cass, his attacking role, and I think he plays very well, much like the style that Paul McShane does, as a leadership on the field, commanding his players, as you mentioned, moving him about.
It's the ability to... the hardest job for a number 9 at Salford is to do the right job to get Jackson Hastings and Robert Louis into the game. There's no doubt about that. Obviously, we've talked about underrated players, but Salford, that's the way that Salford win games. But what we're not talking about is the guy that sets Hastings and Louis up, which is Lussick this season. He's got 8 tries to his name, he's got 8 try assists to his name. He's over 500 tackles. He's doing it at both ends of the field for Salford, but he's still not being spoke about. And I think Joey Lussick has had a fantastic season since he came over from Manly, and I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps going. And if he stays at Salford for a long time, then his name will become more and more recognisable as the years go by.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Number 3 is a guy that we have just spoke about. Actually, you basically said all there is to say about him. But,
Sorry about that.
But we will mention him again because he has been that good, and he's rightly earned his call up for England Knights. Joe Bullock at Wigan has been absolutely outstanding. I mean, as a Wigan fan, I was very worried. Obviously, we lost a lot of key personnel, and coming into the season, we're looking at what our starting pack is and what our front 4 are going to be, sort of thing. And obviously, you expect Ben Flower and Tony Clubb to be in there because they've been outstanding for a number of years. But when we signed Joe Bullock, and obviously Romain Navarrete came last season as well, so you expect that's 2 basically new entities that you're going to have to cope with to go and win this league title. And Joe Bullock stood out as probably the best forward we've had this season, to be honest, and it goes a long way that when you sign a young lad from Barrow and to step up in this manner. It's full credit to Joe Bullock. I think, as you said earlier on, he won't be an unknown figure for long as he tries to break, maybe even break into that England team. We'll have to wait and see. Number 2, we're going to go over to Hull, the red and white side of Hull, more accurately, and we're going to talk about the loose forward. And we talk about, at the start of the season, let's talk about the best loose forwards in the Super League, what names come to mind. You're going to talk about LMS, you're going to talk about Ben Marcilla, you're going to talk about Sean O'Loughlin. One name you're not going to talk about is George Lawler at Hull KR.
Well, yeah. I don't really know where he's come from, but I've seen Hull KR probably about 4 or 5 times this season, and for me he's been their best player in every game. He reminds me a bit of John Bateman in, like, he's just so competitive, and you look at him and he's not the biggest, but by God he doesn't half punch above his body weight, and yeah, he's really stepped into that role and made it his own. And Tim Sheens, I think, has come out and said it a few times that he's their most consistent performer, and he deserves to be on this list. And probably very unlucky not to be number one.
Yeah, agree.
I think the good thing for OKR is that they've got a player like that in the ranks. They really don't want to lose George Lawler, because over the next couple of years, if he continues to perform to this level, it's going to be such a motivation for OKR to keep pushing up after so many struggling years down that bottom four. Where you just don't want to be. They had the year in the championship, obviously. You don't want to be around that sort of atmosphere. You want to be up there pushing constantly, and George Lawler's going to help OKR take a massive step if they can build a team around him. If you can build a forward pack around George Lawler, then you're gonna have a good pack on your hands, and that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we'll go to top spot. Like always, let us know in the comments who your top five are. But our number one, and is another ex-Wigan player actually. We spoke about a few in this list, but it's Wakefield player Ryan Hampshire. Rocky. I think he's been outstanding this year. He's made a transition. There's another one of these players. We spoke about Lewis Tierney and we spoke about Jack Hughes and players that have come from Wigan, Greg Burke, who have struggled and they've got a big move and then become amazing players. And I think Ryan Hampshire's one of these players. Ryan Hampshire was Wigan's backup fullback when Sam Tompkins was in his prime back in 2010-11 when Sam Tompkins was playing at his best. Ryan Hampshire was the backup fullback, and Ryan Hampshire, rightly or wrongly, said to Wigan that if I'm not going to start, I don't want to be here, and got his move away from Wigan. Struggled for a few years at Castleford, and then got his move back to his hometown club at Wakefield, and seems to thrive playing at Wakefield like he's never thrived playing rugby before.
Yeah, well, it's strange really, because when I see that we're playing in a team that's got Ryan Hampshire, I'm actually quite fearful, because he's a bit of a pocket rocket. He's just so quick and clever, and I always he's not a player I'd ever want to come up against, because he'd be a nightmare to handle. And I think he's always been one with, I think we say it quite a lot, don't we, that form is temporary and class is permanent, and he has that class, he has that natural ability, and it was just a case of him, again, finding a club that suits him and getting a regular run of games, and now he's got that, he's showing that class, he's come to form, and he deserves to be on top of this list, because this season he's probably been one of the best players in the competition.
Because I think he's certainly filled the shoes that Liam Finn left behind last season when he went to Widnes and now at Newcastle. I think he reminds me of he plays the same role Luke Gale does at Castleford. I think a much more attacking half-back who wants to run with the ball. We've seen him make breaks. I think he's a very good supporting player, and I think this year's been his breakthrough season. As you mentioned, struggled at Wigan, struggled at Cass, and I think Wakefield's the team for him going forward.
Yeah, but I think there's a lot more passion in him for Wakefield. Obviously, I was a Wakefield fan growing up. But he's played a couple of games in the halves in the absence of two of the best halves in the league, and it doesn't get much harder than that. Filling Danny Bruss' boots is a hard job, as Lee Gaskell's and Matt Frawley are having to find out at Huddersfield. But to fill Jacob Miller's boots as well at the same time, and you then being the only really recognisable half/fullback. Obviously, he plays fullback when they're both fit, but being that only player that's recognisable in that sort of 1-6-7 role is quite a difficult feat, and he's stepped up and he's kept Wakefield well in it. And along with that, obviously Danny Brough takes kicking duties when he's available, but Ryan Hampshire's then took kicking duties from Danny Brough whilst he's not been available and kicked 14 goals in the process, and he's doing his job in every single area. And like you said, he's one of those players that you see and I just don't want to play against him. I know for Wigan, I don't know if this is probably never in his mind, but for the fans at Wigan, we're always thinking, he wants to get one back, and he wants to get one back, because Wigan sort of let him go in the whole Sam Tompkins fiasco, and maybe it was the wrong decision in the long term, because once Tompkins left, he would have been the ideal replacement to have if he's performing the way he is. yeah, I think he's always sort of coming out the back as a pocket rocket, that little half a yard before anyone's there, and then the ability to set people up, and that's where the likes of obviously Johnson before he got injured and Ben Jones Bishop are thriving, because they're getting these outside passes from Ryan Hampshire, who's or Jacob Miller when who's coming off Ryan Hampshire in the middle.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think we said the same about Declan Patton. Sometimes players thrive on that responsibility, and with Brough and Miller out injured, it's been put on his toes. Like, now you've got to show what you can do, and I think a lot of players just need that. It might be a lot of pressure, but he's one of those players that has thrived on it. And yeah, just when you look at his abilities and his key skills, he's kind of similar to Rob Burrow, really, in that, like, I think a lot of teams feared coming up against Rob Burrow, and I think Ryan Hampshire, if they can stay regularly in the team and over the next few years develop his game, and you never know where it could lead.
He's one of those players that could play 1, 6, 7, 9. He could play all the way up that spine. He could play any position, and that's a scary thought for somebody that's got so much ability in so many different positions.
Yeah.
Well, that is our top 5 underrated players. As we said, probably the hardest list we've had to put together so far. But we want you to try and do the same, or mention maybe some players that we haven't mentioned from your clubs. But we hope you've enjoyed it. Please tune in next time. Like, subscribe, and if you hit the notification bell, you'll be the first people to see our content. See you next time.